If you want homemade ice cream, this is way easier than the alternatives.
I have a question. Does anybody here own an ice cream maker?
Yes.
April, do you own an ice cream maker?
No, I don't own an ice cream maker. Unlike a lot of folks in the Milk Street Kitchen, I don't have an ice cream maker. So I love that this ice cream recipe doesn't require any special equipment other than a food processor. This is a classic Italian combination we have here, which is combining strawberries and balsamic vinegar. Balsamic has some sweetness to it, but some tartness to it, and it's gonna marry really nicely with these kind of rosy floral flavors of our strawberries. So the very first thing you wanna do is place your evaporated milk and the large bowl that you're gonna whip it in the fridge. The reason for this is if the evaporated milk is too warm, it's not gonna whip properly and hold the air that we need to get the silky texture that we want out of this ice cream. While those things are chilling, we're gonna make a strawberry puree. We keep it really simple for now with just strawberries and sugar so that our ice cream has a great clear strawberry flavor. We do have a surprise ingredient that we'll be adding later, but for now, we're just blending up strawberries and sugar in the food processor. Let's scrape this down once just to get the smoothest puree possible. This smells so good, it's like a hit of summer. To make sure that we end up with a really, really smooth strawberry puree, we're gonna pass it through a fine mesh strainer to catch those seeds, which could give our ice cream a little bit of a crunchy texture that we don't really want. So take the time to press it through the fine mesh strainer so that you get as much strawberry flavor as possible. You can really see all the seeds that we're catching, right? This is what we're kind of saving ourselves from later on, is all of those seeds stuck in our teeth when we're eating our ice cream. Alrighty, this is pretty much what we want, right? We've really squeezed the moisture out of here. You have this texture of kind of like tomato paste almost. Be sure you take a moment and get this good stuff that will be clinging to the bottom of your strainer, because it can add up to quite a lot actually. We've got our strawberry puree, our evaporated milk is chilling in the fridge, we've got our sweetened condensed milk, some salt, and a little bit of yogurt, as well as some balsamic vinegar. We're just gonna whisk together an entire can of sweetened condensed milk. Something I love about this recipe, the way that our recipe developers designed it, is that it uses the entire can of sweetened condensed milk. A lot of recipes don't always use the whole can, which makes sense because this is kind of intensely flavored. It's quite sweet, right? It's sweetened condensed milk. But you'll notice that other than the little bit of sugar we put in with the strawberries, there's no other sugar in this recipe. All the sweetness that we need is here in the sweetened condensed milk. We're also putting in a half a cup of full-fat Greek yogurt. Yogurt is going to give the ice cream a little bit of lift because it has some tartness to balance out the sweetness that we have from all of that sweetened condensed milk, and it sort of brings out the tartness that is in strawberries. So we have basically an ingredient that's playing up the sweetness of strawberries and an ingredient that's playing up their tartness. Add in about 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of our vinegar. I found that most kind of grocery store brands of balsamic worked just fine. Of course, if you have a balsamic that you really love, you're gonna love it in this ice cream too. So feel free to play around with whatever balsamic. So it's been about 15 minutes. Of course, if it's been more than 15 minutes, that's perfectly fine as well. Again, this uses the entire can of evaporated milk, which I love. I do not want like half cans of various milks floating around in the fridge. We're gonna whisk our evaporated milk, but don't whisk it all the way until stiff peaks. You just want it to have soft peaks, so when you lift your whisk, you should see peaks that kind of softly fold over when you lift the tines of your whisk up out of it. So what will happen if you over whisk your evaporated milk is that when you freeze your ice cream, you'll see that it actually kind of dramatically deflates. It'll actually do a less good job at holding on to the air that we want it to hold if it's whisked all the way to stiff peaks than if we just max out at those soft peaks. It should whisk up really quite quickly, which is part of the reason that I'm doing it by hand. It's just easier and I don't have to clean as many tools. The fact of it being chilled and the bowl being chilled really is your best friend, especially if you are making this on a hot summer day. So you can see how much it's thickened already. We're not quite there yet, right? It doesn't hold its shape at all when we lift out of it, but see how much air it's already capturing, these bubbles that it's holding on to. So what we're going to do now is fold this whipped evaporated milk into our strawberry mixture. My first step is going to be to add about 1/3 of it and incorporate it pretty thoroughly, and then I'll gently fold in the remaining 2/3 until it's all homogeneous. Do this part gently so that you don't knock out all the air that we worked hard to incorporate into the evaporated milk, but you do need the two mixtures to be incorporated enough that you don't have like different layers of ice cream. So we're going to pour this mixture into a freezer-safe container, put it in the freezer for 4 to 6 hours until it's pretty well frozen solid, and then we'll pull it back out. So we're going to cover this with plastic wrap. In general, you want to be careful when you're putting high-fat foods into the freezer because they are particularly good at absorbing odors. And I do not want my strawberry-balsamic ice cream tasting like anything other than strawberries and balsamic. One other thing to note is that if you have a fairly small food processor, you're going to find it easier to do this in batches, 2 or maybe 3 batches. But if you have a larger food processor, it should all fit in a single go. Like at this stage, it really proves the fact that the evaporated milk that we whipped holds bubbles, right? Because you can see how it's holding these air bubbles. This has great flavor right now, but it doesn't have the texture that we want. If you look here, you can see that it still has this kind of like ice crystal structure to it. The reason that we call for the additional step of blending it again and then refreezing is because we're going to break up that structure, get it to kind of like a milkshake-like texture. It's going to be thicker than it was when it went into the freezer, which means it can hold on to air even better than it did in round 1 and give us a creamy, scoopable ice cream texture. So once it's nice and smooth, we're going to transfer it back into our freezer-safe container. You can see that it's really thick, right? It's still cold, it hasn't fully warmed up, and it has this like milkshake consistency. It makes an amazing milkshake, to be clear, but if you want a scoopable ice cream, we're gonna need to freeze it again. Time to scoop. So, take off your plastic wrap. See that compared to after the first time, we're seeing a much creamier and less kind of ice crystal shaped structure on the inside of our ice cream. It's much easier to scoop now than it was after the first round because we've incorporated that air. It's so strawberry. It just has a really, really happy, summery strawberry flavor. It's so good. So this ice cream recipe has become my go-to. You don't have to heat any milk, you don't have to temper any egg yolks, and you don't even have to measure any sugar.
This is shocking. Wait, every single person in this room owns an ice cream maker?
And I said, I don't too, which makes you insane.